Well, I studied architecture in Germany, and later on I did a master's in Australia, in Sydney, at the University of Sydney there. And during that time I was already in profession, working for an office. And since then I worked in several offices, in Düsseldorf, in Berlin, in Sydney. And after that I established my own company together with an Australian partner whose name is Boris Kazansky. My name is THERESA KEILHACKER, and we formed this partnership which is called an Office for Urban Design and Architecture. Architecture is never a singular thing, it's always in the context of its surrounding. I'm not a fan of the so-called Bilbao effect, where we have this individualistic architecture. It sometimes applies, but often the urban context is more important than the architecture itself. Well, I started to work in Düsseldorf for a small office. They were doing everything connected to architecture, from hotels to private residences. And after that, I decided to go to Australia to do my master's degree. I was interested to get more international experience, and that was a very good decision. Well, I enjoyed all of the experiences. They were all very different. I also worked for offices in Berlin, and every office is structured differently, and you always learn something. That's why I always tell our employees that they should go and see other offices as well, even though sometimes it's sad when they leave. But on the other hand, I know it from my own experience that it helped a lot to work in different offices and get different experiences. During the last, more than 10 years, or already 15 years, I formed this network of architects with other colleagues, and we are meeting every month, and we are exchanging our experiences and ideas, and that's a very good way of learning from each other and also get support. My greatest experience was actually to meet Harry Seidler and his wife Penelope, because they are a couple who had a really big impact on the city in the way they built, and they also brought this European point of view to Australia at a time when there was hardly anything built in that modern style of the 50s or 60s, and Harry Seidler built the first skyscraper in Sydney, and that was followed by other skyscrapers. So I learned a lot about high-rises in Sydney, which was a very valuable experience, which I couldn't have made in Berlin, because at that time the doctrine of Hans Stimmern was here in Berlin everywhere, that you should only fill in the block in 22 meters height, and high rises were out. Well, I chose the offices the way I wanted to learn something. You know that we have these 9 building phases according to our fee structure, HRI. And I wanted to get experience in every phase of this process, from the design to the building supervision and to the documentation of the project. And because I was interested in all of that, I had to go to different offices and make this experience, because I couldn't have made it in one office. They are often specialized in one field, and therefore it was fun to do it in different offices. We hardly worked for the public domain. We mainly worked for private clients, and that I find also much easier. I'm a very politically thinking person, but I never wanted to mix it up. I was more interested to be critical about public processes and be engaged in public processes as an architect and for our profession, but I never wanted to work for the public domain or the public client. I find it more interesting to work with private clients because there's more variety for an architect or urban designer to do something. I never had serious problems as a woman. I think advantages and disadvantages were equal, and but the acknowledgement for to get paid is maybe less accepted than for males. Or males are presenting themselves better in the way they are getting paid, or because I often realize that lots of people take it for granted. If you are a nice person and a social person, they think, oh, okay, it doesn't cost anything. And you always have to remind the other person that you are actually sitting in an office, paying staff to get a result, and that process has to be paid. And you find quite often in our society these days that they grab something from the internet which they read, and then you can download your own sketch program or CAD program, and then they come with their own design and with their own ideas of how sort of building construction should work. And I think doctors and lawyers have the same problems than we have to convince clients who know everything better than the architect is the most difficult part, I think, in these days of the World Wide Web, where everybody sort of gets half scientific input, and we have to convince them that we know it better, and for that you have to know a lot. So experience is everything. This is a male aspect that they are far more self-confident to lead a project than females are. But I was not lacking self-confidence, so I had no problem with that. But of course, this is the tendency, yes, and you have to fight for your rights. In my personal experience, it didn't really matter. I get along with females as well as males. Also, in our network of architects, there are males and females, but I realize that there are less females in the profession. Most of them just disappear sooner or later. And therefore, and the same with clients. There are more male clients than female clients. There's a very easy explanation for it. It's a very tough profession, and you have to give everything 120%, I would say, and also in time. It's not good enough to do it half-time or part-time. And therefore, if you are doing it part-time, you are getting very little salaries and very small salaries, and you are getting very uninteresting work to do. And then automatically you are then pushed into a corner where you can hardly get out again. And then often female architects say, "Oh, I'm having a baby at home. I'm working part-time. I have to work part-time, and I'm only having uninteresting work on my table because of it. And therefore, I just skip the job because I'm more happy to be at home with my kid than having such work on my table." And therefore, this is the compromise every woman has to make. If she's doing part-time, she's out, really. That's my experience. Well, the creativity in the design process is often in the beginning, the main part, but I was very much always interested in the building process, and therefore I put a lot of energy into details as well, and materials, and that the craftsmanship is well done. I'm also I'm very glad to go to the building site and look what they are doing, and have a good relationship with craftsmen. No, not at all. They are quite happy to see a female on the building site. I think one has to be consequent, really, in what you're doing. It's not good enough to have a good idea and then not follow it up with intensity. And it takes a lot of energy. If you're not prepared to invest this energy, there won't be a good outcome. I'm convinced of that. Yeah, I think work experience is always the best way of finding out where your talents are. And because the profession has a really wide range of possibilities, and there are lots of niches, and one has to find out which apply for one's own life, for one's own talents, and therefore it's really useful to get a widespread of experience right from the beginning. And don't be anxious. Try it out, experiments. I mean, if you don't like it in an office, just change and go somewhere else or go into another country. I think one should not waste time in that respect.